Hello and welcome to Gardening at 58 North. So in this video I'd like to give you guys a quick update on my Madagascan Palm here. This is a Pachypodium lamerei. It's quite a common houseplant nowadays. It didn't used to be so common a few years ago, but it's certainly gaining in popularity. So when I last gave you the update, I had just repotted it into this new pot, which you can see here, and it has put on some quite good growth. So I'll quickly show you a picture now of how it looked in the last update, and you'll see how much growth it's put on. So that was about 5 months ago or so, and as you can see it's probably about doubled in size. It hasn't doubled in height, but the overall size has probably doubled. Now that, after I'd repotted that, it was growing in my conservatory. It did okay, but it was towards the end of the summer, so the growth was starting to slow down. And as I had recently got a new grow box, I wanted to try putting it under grow lamp, see if I could continue the growth over the autumn and into the winter period. So the grow box I've got currently, I've got two, and the one I put it in is my new one. The grow lamp is actually a little bit overpowered for the size of the grow box, so it's a 500 watt high pressure sodium bulb, and the grow box isn't massive, so what I find is the spot in the middle is incredibly bright, and it's too bright for most plants. So within the grow box, the areas that were a little bit further away from the harsh grow light, I had things like my rice plant and my bamboo and other plants that didn't need too much light. But in the middle it was too bright for most, so I thought I'd try it with the Madagascan Palm, because this can survive quite high light levels. You can see though on the top there is a bit of scorch on the leaves. So you can see there, the top of the leaves were scorched unfortunately. A lot of them got bleached kind of a yellow colour, which is quite often a sign that it's starting to get too much light. And also the other ones dried up. That might be either from too much light, or it could actually be from high temperatures and low humidity that cause the edges of the leaves to dry up. But you can see it's the top leaves that were affected the most. The leaves that were lower down, which were slightly shaded by the other leaves, and also further distance away from the grow lamp, they're actually quite healthy still, and they're looking quite good. So it was interesting to see how the growth went with the extra light. It didn't grow exactly how I expected. When it was just growing in the conservatory with the natural light, the stem stayed quite narrow, and it was much narrower at the top of the stem than the base. It was more like a tapered effect, and it was growing leaves relatively rapidly. But then when I switched it to the grow lamp, the leaf growth almost completely stopped. And to be honest, there hasn't been a huge amount more leaves put on it since it was put into the grow light area. In fact, these very long leaves at the middle here, these were put out just after it had been repotted. It got its roots established in the new compost. That gave it extra strong, vigorous growth. It put out these nice long leaves. And then when I put it under the grow lamp, the only leaves that then grew were these smaller, shorter leaves which got crisped up. So it was unusual. There wasn't a huge amount of height increase. Certainly not many new leaves grown, but what seemed to happen is the trunk really started to thicken up. Hopefully you can see on the camera, it's actually thicker now at the top than it is at the bottom, and it's actually at its narrowest towards the middle. So this time last year, its height was just down here, and you can see that's where the new growth started. That's why there's no leaves under there. It's also slightly narrower because that was a dormant period over winter. So that was where it was growing this time last year. So it's doubled in height and more than doubled in size, probably 4 times the size. I'll try and put a picture up now if I can of what it looked like at this stage last year. And you can see it's really grown a lot in 1 year. So as I say, it's been there for a few months now in the grow lamps. The growth of new leaves has completely stopped, but it's just fattening up more and more. So what I'm going to do now is put it back into the conservatory, give it a cold period, give it a resting period, just let it go dormant. It might lose its leaves, it might not, it depends how cold it gets. But I feel like this plant in the wild naturally goes through cycles of growth and dormancy, and if I don't give that natural dormancy period, it will stop growing, and I think that's what it's done now. Because it's been in the growth phase for too long, it thinks that it's time to go dormant soon, so it's not putting any more growth on, but it's still collecting plenty of energy through the sun, through photosynthesis, so that's why it's been fattening up its stem, storing up its energy reserves, storing up its water reserves, getting ready for the next dormant period. So when it was under the grow lamps, I was actually watering this daily. It's an incredibly thirsty plant when it's growing rapidly, especially if it's in high temperatures and high light levels. And when it was in the grow box, it was around 18 degrees at night, but during the day I changed the fans on the grow box, so instead of pulling the hot air out, it blew the hot air over the grow light and then into the grow box to increase the temperature further. This was about 28 degrees during the day with very low humidity levels and with a good air circulation as well. That meant that the plant was very thirsty. So this plant, although it's a succulent, where it comes from in the wild, it has wet periods and dry periods. In the wet periods it gets a decent amount of rain, it then puts on lots of growth, grows lots of leaves, and then in the dry periods it completely shuts down, goes dormant, and it just looks like a spiky cactus and it stays completely dry. So that's the conditions I've been recreating. It's basically been in the growing phase since last spring. It's been growing all summer, and then in the autumn and beginning of winter I had it under grow lamps, so it was still in the growing phase. So now what I'm going to do is I've completely cut out the water. I haven't watered this for about a week now, and I've also put it in a much cooler environment, out of the grow box, away from the bright light, so it should go dormant, have a nice resting period, and then come spring, when it naturally starts to warm up again, it should put on a lot of new growth. If I wasn't to give it this resting period, I think it would just stop growth, and it would just keep these leaves and keep fattening up the stem, but it wouldn't put much more height onto the plant, and it wouldn't put out any new leaves. So what I'm hoping for from giving it this resting period is it's going to be restarted, it's going to recognise that it's had its rest, and then when it comes to growth in spring, it should grow a lot faster and put out lots of new leaves. So that's all for this video, just a quick update. As I say, it's been growing quite well, it's now going into a resting phase, so when I show you the next update in spring, it'll probably be just starting to grow again. At that point, the leaves will probably look a lot worse, they'll probably have lost quite a few leaves, as it's quite cold in the conservatory, and the light levels are very bad, or certainly at this time of year. And then come spring, I'll probably have an update kind of March, April time, whenever the conservatory starts to warm up again in spring and we get some strong sunshine again. And we should get a lot of new leaves starting to come out the top, and but the rest of the plant will probably look quite bare. It just depends. This doesn't always lose its leaves when it's dormant, sometimes it keeps them. So that's all for this update, and I'll see you guys in a few months when it comes into the new growing season.